Catholic history and theology is deeply connected to the world we live in today. Through examining the lives of saints, exploring the Bible, and learning about impactful Christian traditions, we uncover how to act in good faith. Bona Fide, presented by Chadielle Fayad, Thursday, 8 p.m, fortnightly, live on the Voice of Charity.
Welcome back to another episode of Bona Fide. Tonight I have the pleasure of being joined by Father David Ranson, who I met through attending his Mass at a church in Chatswood, which I was absolutely blown away by his homily and just immediately felt connected, and I knew that I had to have him on the program. So I'm really excited to introduce him today. He is the parish priest of Chatswood, as I already noted, and he also is the Vicar General for the Diocese of Broken Bay. Welcome, Father.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be able to join you and your listeners on this occasion.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. Today we'll be talking about the 10 Commandments and also the exaltation of the Holy Cross. The feast day for the exaltation of the cross is this Saturday, so I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about the history of it, and also those completing the Creed to Communion at Our Lady of Lebanon on Monday nights will be exploring the topic of the 10 Commandments. So ideally, this can serve as some further context and knowledge about the 10 Commandments. Before we begin, Father, I was wondering if you might like to lead us in prayer.
Yes, thank you, Chadielle. So let's pause for a moment and place ourselves in the presence of God. Father, we give you thanks for hearts that are open, for minds that are ready to listen more deeply to the many ways in which you come into our lives. Guide our hopes and guide our actions, that they may always conform to the will of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. So, once again, welcome. I thought maybe it'd be nice to just talk a little bit about your background, just so some of our listeners who might not have attended Mass at your church, or maybe didn't know much about like Roman Catholic Mass in general. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what your journey to priesthood was like.
Thank you, Chadielle. Well, it's had various phases, and it's been somewhat of a different kind of journey, I suppose, than what most priests would have enjoyed. I grew up in Tasmania in a very committed Catholic family. We were part of a very vibrant Catholic community in Launceston in Tasmania, and so I was very much formed by the church there, and my experience of the priests in Tasmania was very positive. My family had many friends who were priests, and a number of them had a very significant influence on me as a boy growing up. And it was really from them that I first sensed the possibility of priesthood, and it was through their friendship then that I really, the desire for priesthood was very much developed. However, I took a slightly different route, and in 1980 I joined the monastic community of Karrawara Abbey in Victoria. Karrawara Abbey is a Trappist monastic community, Cistercian community, and I was a member of that community for some 20 years. So I was ordained as a monk in the monastery of Tarrawara in 1992. But after that, some years after that, I discerned a call to a more active ministry, and so I took time away from the monastery. I was chaplain at St Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne for several years, before then being invited to join the faculty of the Catholic Institute of Sydney in Strathfield. And I was there at the Catholic Institute then for the next 15 years. So as an academic and as an academic administrator. My very first parish, in fact, was not until 2011 when I was made parish priest of the parish of Wahroonga in the Diocese of Broken Bay. And I was appointed Vicar General in 2015. So I've been Vicar General since for the last 9 years, and the last 3 years I've also been parish priest of Chatswood. So it's been a rather fascinating journey, a little different than I suppose most would have had, but certainly one that's been very rich.
So you said you've been the Vicar General for the Diocese of Broken Bay for 9 years now. Mm-hmm. What has that involved exactly for someone that might not actually know?
The role of the Vicar General is an important role. It's required by the Church's law. Every bishop must appoint a Vicar General. And the role of the Vicar General is to assist the bishop in the governance of the diocese. So I help Bishop Anthony Randazzo in his administration of the Diocese of Broken Bay. And that very much depends on how he asks me to assist him and the level of involvement that he requires of me. Here in our Diocese of Broken Bay, it is a very significant position. It has more direct responsibility for clergy and for parishes and safeguarding and many issues that emerge in the life of a diocese. So I spend about 3 days of the week in the diocesan chancery, working with the other staff of the chancery to ensure that the whole operation keeps afloat.
Are there any key goals that you have within the diocese for the next year?
There are many, in fact. So Bishop Anthony is very energetic in his mission, and so we have a range of things before us at the moment. We are certainly on the journey towards a new cathedral for the diocese, which would be very significant as Bishop Anthony envisages it. It's not just a building, but a whole precinct of pastoral and liturgical life. So that's before us. We are moving towards the incorporation of our school system and of our social service agency. Bishop Anthony has undertaken 3 major projects of pastoral discernment for each of the regions in the diocese, which include the Central Coast, the Northern Beaches and the North Shore. And so this has been a very important implementation of the synodal character of the Church to invite people in those 3 regions to come together in discernment of how we can enliven the mission of the Church in those 3 areas. Next year, of course, will be the year of Jubilee for the Church, and so we're planning a whole range of opportunities for the year of Jubilee. So yeah, there's lots on the boil.
Sounds amazing and really exciting to hear about the cathedral that you are developing. Being Maronite Catholic, I often find, because there aren't many Maronite churches, or any really, in the Northern Beaches, so there's so much great value in being able to attend Mass in Chatswood. Any other news to share, or any recent I guess, milestones that were hit?
Well, the life of a diocese is a never-ending dynamism. So there's always things that rise and emerge, and we're working on a whole range of different things. Recently, Bishop Anthony reviewed the way in which our chancery was organised, and that's been a big project to implement that review and create the changes that he has determined. The Synod of Bishops, to which Bishop Anthony is a member, is occupying a great deal of our attention at the moment, not only in terms of the meeting in Rome, but the way in which we as a diocese can be part of that momentum and implement some of its features.
And so you've been the parish priest for Chatswood in more recent years. So what has that been like?
Yes, I came to Chatswood in 2021, and I had been in the parish of Wahroonga. Wahroonga is a small parish, but Chatswood is a very large parish. So it's been the fascinating experience. Of course, I arrived in the midst of COVID, and so my first couple of years at Chatswood were navigating our way through COVID. However, it's the most vibrant of communities, and we have an extraordinary, energetic parish, and so there are many things that are working forward for us. So we are entering now our second century as a parish, and so there's enormous opportunities available to us in respect to the pastoral growth of the community itself, which is very large and very multicultural, and being in the midst of the city of Chatswood, there are possibilities and opportunities open to us as a parish that may not be as present in a more suburban type context. We also occupy very significant property in the middle of Chatswood, and therefore there are huge opportunities there for us to develop at the service of our mission. And most recently, we have been gifted with the first-class relic of Carlo Acutis, and who's to be canonised by Pope Francis next year. And the arrival of the relic has been a further increase to the community's energy and enthusiasm. We will celebrate the receipt of the relic in on October the 11th, the vigil of Carlo's feast day. And our thinking and our hope is that his presence with us will generate yet even further life, and that our church, which is a very significant building, will indeed become a place of pilgrimage. And particularly for next year, in the year of Jubilee, Bishop Anthony has nominated our parish as a shrine of hope. And so we will be seeking to enter into the Jubilee very actively, with much opportunity for people's growth and conversion.
Well, that sounds absolutely amazing. I'll definitely have to be keeping an eye on the calendar for next year and seeing what you'll be doing in terms of events and masses and liturgies. I'm curious if you have been to a Maronite Mass before, and if not, have you ever collaborated or worked alongside Maronites?
Yes, I have been to a number of Maronite Masses. I've been a guest of Bishop Tarabay's on a number of occasions. And he invited me to preach the retreat to the Maronite clergy this year in January. So I spent a whole week with the clergy of the Maronite eparchy in Borkham Hills, and that was a wonderful experience. So, of course, there with the men over the course of the week, we celebrated the Liturgy of the Hours according to the Maronite tradition, and we celebrated Mass each day. And it was a fascinating experience to be part of those liturgies where English and Syriac and Aramaic were all brought into the one celebration. And it was also a great opportunity for me to gain an understanding of the Maronite people in a way that I hadn't before. So having dinner with the priests every night provided a great opportunity for conversation and to understand something of the history of the Maronite Church and its character, but also the nature of the people of Lebanon and the Maronites of Lebanon. I hadn't realized, for example, that the Maronites were people of the mountains, and with all the implications of being mountain dwellers. So it was fascinating insight into Maronite life and culture and history.
It's really interesting, isn't it? There was recently an article that Father John Flada wrote for, I think it's the Catholic Weekly, I'm pretty sure. And it kind of explored the Maronites and their history. And it was just a really good refresher, even for myself being a Maronite, because I'm Australian born. So it was just a really good way to look at the history and understand what our ancestors had been through and survived in order for us to continue to practice. I thought we might talk about the 10 Commandments, which the students completing the Creed to Communion at Our Lady of Lebanon will be learning about this week. Some of them are on their way to their baptism and their communion with the Maronite Church. And some people are like me when I did it and just wanting to learn a little bit more about the Catholic faith. So the Catechism's traditional presentation of the commandments for memorization are: number 1, I am the Lord your God. You shall not have strange gods before me. Number 2, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Number 3, remember to keep holy the Lord's day. Number 4, honor your father and mother. Number 5, you shall not kill. Number 6, you shall not commit adultery. Number 7, you shall not steal. Number 8, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Number 9, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Number 10, you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. So a question that I had was, what are some modern examples of what we might have, of how we might have strange gods before the Lord? Because I'm conscious that when these occurred, there were more instances of believing in multiple gods and that sort of thing. Like he might have been, I guess, speaking to that kind of audience at the time. But nowadays, I guess there might be modern examples of how we might worship strange gods before the Lord. Do you happen to know any modern examples of that?
No, it's a good question, Chadielle. The 10 Commandments, of course, are each of them in different ways, trying to ensure the right order of relationship in the world. They recognize that we flourish in our life to the extent that we respect the right order of relationship. And primarily, of course, and that right order is both vertical and horizontal. It begins with a fundamental recognition that we are created and that we are dependent on a creator and that we are not gods ourselves, but that we find ourselves in relationship with a God, a being who has brought us into existence, who keeps us in existence, and who invites us into a fullness of life. And then to whom we are accountable for our actions. And that accountability then translates itself into a sense of right relationship with those closest to us and with those with whom we live in community. And it's, as I say, it's only when that right order of relationship is respected and encouraged that we truly grow as the people God has created us to be. So we live in a time, as you say, where there may not be pagan idols in front of us from which to choose, as it were. But of course, that doesn't mean to say that there are not elements that we put in front of us that no longer that take us away from the right order. Of course, the greatest God, with a small g, that we place before God, the living God, is the self. And so the self has become a God that we place before the true God. And so when we simply are focused on ourselves, when we are simply looking for self-fulfillment, when we make our decisions purely based on how we feel or on what enables our own self-advancement, we have forgotten that we are creatures and that we are not the center of the universe, but that we find ourselves in relationship to something other than ourself. So our self becomes a God, but then also the things then that we pursue as ends in themselves. So money, career, success, anything that we pursue as an end to which everything else becomes a means, has usurped the true place of the living God and become for us a God. And so there are as many gods with a small g now as there ever have been. They take on a different guise, they take on a different face. But it's really anything that replaces that true understanding of ourselves as having been brought into existence through the Creator, and anything that intervenes or gets in the way of living in that mindfulness, that the relationship is one of creature to Creator.
Thank you so much for that. That was really insightful, especially with regards to the self. And as you were talking about how we place more and more emphasis on the self in modern times, I was reflecting on the commandments again, and not a single one of them asks you to prioritize yourself in any way. Not a single commandment. It is always about how you treat the people around you, and never about how you treat yourself. So, you know, like there is a lot of like self-care culture these days, but even then, like it's not necessarily a commandment. So I guess it allows you to like think about that the next time you are trying to focus on yourself. And there is a balance to everything.
Yes, we've always got to remember that all of us, of course, we're committed to caring for ourselves, but the object of life is not ourselves.
Yeah.
And indeed, the gospel goes even further and says that we will only find happiness if we forget about ourselves.
Yeah.
And so for the gospel, it's a only through a self-emptying become a self-giving will we find who we truly are. So the Ten Commandments, of course, prefigure the gospel command of love, but importantly frame that into this recognition, as I say, that we are to live in a right order of relationship, which is both vertical and horizontal. We find ourselves as part of a community, and in discovering ourselves as part of a community, there are responsibilities that we have towards one another in that community. And the Ten Commandments, particularly the 4th to the 10th commandment reflects those responsibilities that we have to maintain one another in the bonds of community.
What does it mean to take the name of the Lord in vain?
Well, we might think that that's simply, if we take the Lord, if we, as it were, swear. But it's much more than that, of course. It's the forgetfulness. Whenever we become forgetful of that right relationship that we have between ourselves and God, and that means that it kind of represents it when we discard that relationship or that recognition. Then we've relativized or dismissed the importance of God in our life. Whenever we forget or discard or diminish the importance of God in our life, we are in fact taking the Lord's name in vain. But also when we ascribe to ourselves an authority that we don't have, then too we've taken the Lord's name in vain. We sometimes get the experience where people suggest that what they say is right because they've been told so by God, and so they've misunderstood the way in which revelation occurs, and taken on to themselves an authority that may not be properly theirs. And this too is a way of taking the name of God in vain.
So I guess something I learned from doing the Creed to Communion course was the importance of treating Sunday as a holy day. And even one of the most fascinating things that were suggested was to actually truly rest on Sunday in the way that we're called to. And that was an eye-opener for me, because I find myself getting up early on Sundays, trying to go to Mass, and then trying to achieve everything under the sun before Monday begins. And then to hear that I should actually be treating it as a day of rest was kind of an eye-opener to me, because it made me realize I hadn't truly been keeping it holy, possibly by trying to achieve so much on Sundays. And then it gives way to the thought that maybe if I'm feeling this pressure to get everything done on Sunday, then I'm not using my weeks the way I should be, if that makes sense. And so then being called to rest on Sunday allows us to be our best selves, I guess, throughout the whole week. I think that was something interesting that I thought about. So with regards to keeping the Lord's Day holy, what are some other ways to keep the day holy that people often forget about?
Well, yes, this is a really important consideration, because it follows, of course, from the Jewish understanding of the Sabbath. And so the Sabbath is kept in Judaism as an echo of Genesis, in which we read how at the end of the 6 days of creation, God rested. But it's important to recognize that the word that's used in the scriptures for God's resting doesn't mean to say that God kind of fell back exhausted, having worked so hard over the 6 previous days. Rather, the word that's used for Sabbath, for rest, is that God listens again to all that God has done. So this is the call to each of us. All of us need Sabbath moments. All of us need Sabbath experiences. And for us as Christians, this has been translated, of course, to Sunday, the day of the Lord's resurrection. And we celebrate the Lord's resurrection by primarily coming together as his community in worship, and so for Mass. But also part of bringing forward that principle of Sabbath is providing us with an opportunity to listen, to reflect, to look back on what has happened over the course of the last week, and to consider it, to listen to it deeply, and to wonder, what has this last week taught me? What are the things that I've learned through this last week? What can I take forward from what I've experienced what I've experienced in the last week to what lies ahead of me in the coming week? So it is a Sabbath to live in a Sabbath moment, which is an opportunity of our celebration of the Lord's Day, is to deepen our experience of self-reflection, and through developing our self-reflection to develop our self-awareness, and in all of this to be listening for where and how the Spirit of God might be continuing to work in our lives and inviting us into yet deeper life.
That is so true, and something to definitely keep in mind the next time you get the Sunday blues or the Sunday scaries. Something might be calling you to self-reflect.
That's right. So yes, it would be unfortunate if we spent Sunday running around, even from religious event to religious event, but never in fact stopping and pausing and thinking and reflecting. As one writer, T.S. Eliot, put it, we do not want to be those who have the experience but miss the meaning. And Sundays, the Lord's Day, a wonderful opportunity for us to hold the experiences that we've had and wonder at the meaning that might be at the heart of them.
Here's a bit of a complex question that I have. How do the 10 Commandments come into play with family dynamics, in the sense that we know we are called to honor our parents, but are parents called to honor their children? And how do we honor parents that don't honor their children?
This commandment underscores that we can only ever be son or daughter. We can never not be son or daughter. And underneath this and developing it is the recognition that we are our relationships, that we live in relationship or not at all. To be human is to be relational. And relationship is not optional, it's constituent of our very identity, of our very existence. This is a very important commandment, particularly in a time when that very fundamental quality and nature of relationships is under stress. It's under stress through the development of technology that can intervene in the natural order, but also then it's under stress through the very new social constructs that have emerged, in which our identity, as in our gender, has falsely been presented with fluidity. And so all of this fundamentally attacks the very fabric of family. And yet we recognize from our Christian perspective that family is absolutely essential to right living and to the way in which we can be as God has created us to be. Now, we know that family life is difficult at times, and that there are families that struggle, and that there are families that are dysfunctional, and that there are families through which people become deeply hurt. And that is something for us as a community to identify and to work with, because we have a social responsibility to always work towards the health of families. At the same time, recognizing, all the challenges that are there. But if we dissolve family and think that family has no longer any relevance or importance, then in fact we've created a very, very dangerous society that cannot possibly work towards people's fulfillment and happiness. So we're always caught up here with a tension between a recognition of something that is ideal and at the same time with an identification of where and how things are not ideal, but one doesn't cancel out the other. And so we're holding both of those realities. And it's only as we hold both of them together that we work through that which is most true.
I guess something that I feel that would be challenging is if someone was a child of perhaps an abusive parent or an absentee parent, how can they continue to have a Christian approach to those parents, in the sense that how do they honor them in that kind of dynamic?
Sometimes we honor the situation by removing ourselves from the situation, by ensuring that there is a safe distance. So the commandment is not suggesting that we push on irrespective of the abuse. If we are in an abusive situation, the most loving thing that we can do is sometimes to remove ourselves. And it's only because when we have removed ourselves and taken actions to prevent the abuse that we can see the other more clearly for who they are, and then begin to understand them for who they are. And so this might be the most appropriate form of honouring somebody, is to actually create a distance and then try and see them more fully, more clearly against their entire kind of history and background. So, but we are never not son or daughter.
Yeah.
And so even if I have, a very painful experience of my mother or my father, I'm still a son, I'm still a daughter. And that means that I cannot exist in any other way. And so even in those painful situations, and it might be a painful journey to do so, but I'm trying to understand, where I have come from and who I have come from. And that may be less than ideal, but nonetheless, this relationship and the history of relationships that go before it, my whole genealogy, has shaped the person that I am. And I will only understand who I am myself if I can appreciate the genealogy from which I've come.
I very much agree with that. And I especially with the distance giving way to understanding, and then understanding giving way to compassion, which is what we eventually strive for as Christians, to be compassionate towards others. And then for people to go on, when they do have children of their own, they've gone into that new relationship with the wisdom of what to not repeat.
Yep. And that's honoring our father and mother.
Yeah.
Mm.
I guess my last question on the commandments is around bearing false witness against your neighbor. What does that mean exactly? And is there a modern example of this?
Well, again, it's the recognition that we live and grow through the bonds of community. And so anything that threatens the bonds of community and that marginalize people or alienate others or put others down or exclude others in that sense is working against community. So I bear false witness against my neighbour today in a modern sense, I think, when I work actively for their marginalisation, for their exclusion, where I don't recognise the value that they have and that the dignity that is theirs. So whenever I belittle somebody, whenever I put somebody down, whenever I isolate somebody, then I'm no longer being faithful to the recognition that we live in community, and it is in and through community that we flourish.
The Feast of the Exaltation of the Cross is this weekend. So the feast is also known as the Triumph of the Cross, and it commemorates three key events. The first being the discovery of the true cross in 326, and its exaltation for public veneration in 335, and the recovery of the cross from the Persians in 628. So Saint Helena, the mother of the Emperor Constantine, discovered the true cross under the Temple of Venice in Jerusalem. The basilica and shrine was built on Calvary by Constantine, marking the site of the crucifixion. First of all, I'm not sure if I got all the important historical details on this event. Were there any further?
I think you've covered them well. Indeed, the feast day of the Exaltation of the Cross is, as you say, founded on those events. However, of course, I think it has a great significance for us, coming as it does, almost halfway through the year between Easter and Easter. So this is an important feast day because it helps. I mean, we celebrate Good Friday only once a year, and it's an annual event. But the cross is of such significance for us in our Christian faith that it needs to be before us at all times. And of course, it is before us at all times whenever we have a crucifix in front of us. But the reason why, indeed, we place a crucifix in so many of our places and have it with us all the time is to remind us of just how central the mystery of the cross actually is. And so it is good for us to pause, as it were, halfway through between Good Friday and Good Friday to bring back to mind the importance of the cross in our understanding of our salvation. And one of the important accompaniments to that, of course, is the feast day that comes after. Certainly in the Latin Rite Church on the 15th of September, we celebrate the feast day of Our Lady of Sorrows. And of course, that has special meaning for me because my parish church is Our Lady of Sorrows. And so it's a further way of bringing to mind the importance of the cross. And it's very helpful to do that through, as it were, through the filter or through the lens or through the eyes of Mary herself. She herself has a great deal to teach us about how we respond to the mystery of suffering in our life. And so the cross raises the very question about suffering. Why is there suffering in the world? And how do we enter into our experience of suffering so that it doesn't become a tomb to enclose us, but an opportunity of new and fresh life? And Mary herself, through her own 7 sorrows, really leads us step by step into a recognition of how we most faithfully and most fully can enter into those questions. So I think for me, the 2 feast days are 2 sides of the one coin almost. We celebrate the exaltation of the cross, the triumph of the cross, and in so doing, we bring back to mind halfway through the year, as it were, the importance and the centrality of the cross. And the very next day, we are with Mary at the foot of the cross and allowing her to teach us how to engage and enter into the question about suffering.
That is very, very well put, I guess, in terms of being like the two sides of the coin and how they kind of go together perfectly. I could definitely see that. I was wondering if your parish do anything to celebrate the feast of Our Lady of Sorrows.
Yes, we do. For the past so many days, we've been engaged in an online novena. So every night since last Friday, the 6th of September, through to Saturday, the 14th of September, we've had the opportunity for people to gather in a novena. And on each of those nights, we reflected on one of the sorrows, 7 sorrows of Our Lady. And so that's been really wonderful. We've had up to 60, 70 screens join us each night to pray the novena. And then next Sunday, the actual feast day of Our Lady of Sorrows, we'll have a parish main mass, which is at 10:30, will be the mass of the feast day. And we have celebrations through the course of the morning. But really importantly, at that 10:30 mass on Sunday, we're welcoming 6 adults into, we're welcoming 3 adults into the church. They've already been baptized, but now being received into the church. And we are celebrating the confirmation of 6 adults as well. So it'll be a very special event. So we are at the same time thinking through and praying through what does it mean to be Our Lady of Sorrows. If we are a church named in honour of Our Lady of Sorrows, what does that mean for our vocation as a parish community and for our sense of mission as a parish community? And it would seem very much that that's around being with people in their suffering, being a place where those who are suffering might find a sense of peace and possibility. We're thinking of that through just slowly but surely.
Sounds great. And I do remember hearing that there were going to be novenas prayed over the week at Mass last Sunday, because I did attend Mass in Chatswood last Sunday. So I also wanted to ask if you had ever participated in a feast activity for the exaltation of the cross.
Not so much. In the monastery, it was the day in which the habit was changed from the winter habit to the summer habit, funnily enough. But in the Latin rite, the feast has not had it hasn't had prominence. And so it very much depends on, each parish thinking it through. I can't recall an actual event other than, of course, the celebration, the praying of the Stations of the Cross. So we pray the Stations of the Cross, and that is a beautiful way of entering into the feast day.
I think it's also just the history behind it as well, and like how much our Catholic faith has been through to continue to, I guess, survive into this, into the current world, I guess. So like the fact that it's celebrating events over 300 years, I guess. Just the fact that it wasn't not only the exaltation for public veneration, but also its recovery 300 years later from the Persians. Just fascinating to see what we've been through, I guess, something to reflect on.
Well, this is right. It speaks of the extraordinary nature of tradition, and the importance of tradition, that we are part of a people that has lived and worshipped over such a long time through so many different circumstances, and through all of that experience, we remain the body of Christ. And so anything that celebrates that history has great value.
Thank you so much for joining me. This was incredibly insightful, and I know that people listening will benefit greatly from everything you had to say about the 10 Commandments.
Lovely, Chadielle. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be able to talk to me. Goodbye then to all your listeners as well. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for listening.
Catholic history and theology is deeply connected to the world we live in today. Through examining the lives of saints, exploring the Bible, and learning about impactful Christian traditions, we uncover how to act in good faith. Bona Fide, presented by Chadielle Fayad, Thursday, 8 p.m, fortnightly, live on the Voice of Charity.